Excel was the original killer app because it allowed people to take large sets of data and quickly analyze to find statistical information. In my last video, I showed you how to create formulae and use functions to complete calculations in a spreadsheet. I covered sum, average, maximum, and minimum functions, but there are many more to choose from. In this video, I'll show you some of the counting functions and how they work. To demonstrate these functions, I'll be using a set of data collected in a survey asking people about their pets. The first thing we might want to look at in this set of data is the number of people who responded. To do this, we might try to use the count function on the name column and see how many names there are. If we try this, we find that the function doesn't work. It counts 0 items in that range. This is because the count function only counts cells that have numbers in them. To count cells that have any value, we can use the COUNTA function. COUNTA counts any cell that is not blank. Another number we might want to get out of this table is the number of people who own pets. Column D contains information that could help us figure this one out. In this column, each person has either put the number of pets they have, left it blank, or written the word none. If we want to count the number of people who own pets, we can just count the number of cells that have numbers in them. To do this, we can use the count function. In this survey, we were trying to get people's contact information. As you can see, some people didn't give us that information. If we wanted to count how many people skipped this part of the survey, we could count the blanks in column C. Excel gives us the COUNTBLANK function to do just that. Usually, you want to count more specific information in a table, in addition to the general information we've already counted. To do this, Excel has a COUNTIF function that only counts the cells if it meets a certain condition. For example, if we wanted to count the number of females that took the survey, we could write a function equals COUNTIF, we put in the range, and for the criteria, we'd write female. Notice that the condition that it checks against is in quotation marks. We could also count something like the number of people with 2 pets. To do this, we could use something like equals COUNTIF, select our range, and put in the condition that the cell is equal to 2. When we use COUNTIF with numbers, we can also set conditions to check if something is greater or less than something else. If we wanted to count the number of adults that completed the survey, we could write a function like equals COUNTIF, select our range, and check if they are greater than or equal to the age of 18. Since these functions give back numbers, we can put arithmetic operators, like plus, minus, multiply, divide, between them to create more complex expressions. For example, when we counted the number of pet owners, we counted the number of cells with numbers in them. This worked, but if someone had put in that they had 0 pets, instead of leaving it blank or putting none, we would have miscounted because it would have counted the people who had put in 0. To fix this problem, instead of just counting the numbers, we could count the cells that have numbers and then subtract the number of cells that have 0 in them. Here's another tricky number to count. How many people surveyed are teenagers? Here are 2 ways to solve this problem. We could count everyone who took the survey and subtract the people younger than 13 and older than 19. To do that, we could go equals, select our total up here, subtract COUNTIF, the people in the range who are less than 13, and subtract the people in the range who are greater than 19. We could also solve this problem using a different function. The function COUNTIFS. That's with an S on the end. This function allows you to put in multiple criteria for counting. In this case, we would use equals COUNTIFS, select our range, and we only want to count it if it is greater than or equal to 13. Select the range again, and put our second criteria, that it's less than and or equal to 19. This will only count the cells that meet both conditions, that it is both greater than or equal to 13 and less than or equal to 19. And we can see that it gives the same number. When you're counting values, it's often useful to know what proportion of the group it makes up. To do this, we can find percentages in Excel. To find a percentage, you just divide the number in question by the total number in the group. In this case, we're always going to divide by the number in D2. You'll notice that when Excel does the division, we end up with a decimal number. This is because percentages are always technically fractions over 100. To view the value with a percent sign, just tell Excel to interpret the number as a percent by clicking on the option in the ribbon. You might remember from a previous video that when we use cell references, like D2, these are relative to the cell. So D2 is actually one cell left and one cell up from the current cell. This means if I was to try and drag this formula down, the next cell wouldn't be accurate because instead of using the denominator of D2, it's using the value that is one cell over and one cell up. If we want to make it so that the formula always uses the value of D2, we can put $signs in front of the row and column to make it an absolute cell reference. Now when we drag the formula down, it will always refer to the same cell. We'll look at this more in our next video. In this video, I showed you how to use different counting functions in Excel. We looked at the COUNTA function that counts any cell that is not empty, the COUNT function that counts the number of cells that contain numbers, the COUNTBLANK function that counts the number of empty cells, and the COUNTIF function that counts cells that meet a certain condition. We then looked at how we can combine these functions in some more complex examples. Finally, we looked at how we can calculate percentages in Excel and format them properly. Thanks for watching.